this church isn't unique. They teach, no one else can teach the way that we teach. Well, the Shincheonji church teaches exactly how you teach. The Moonies teach exactly how you teach. A lot of the teaching from Ahnsahnghong, he copied from the Moonies. So, I thought it was unique because I wasn't exposed. But then I started to see that, the teachings really aren't that unique. The methods that they use aren't unique. It's just something that's very common out there. I just had no idea because I was restricted from looking it up. So once I was able to see what else was out there, that's when I started to realize that this is just another group, just like all those other groups.
So today I'm talking with Anthony, a former member of the World Mission Society Church of God. Anthony joined the church in 2011 and worked his way up to becoming a deacon in the church. So Anthony's going to share about how and why he joined and his experiences in the church and then what ultimately led him to leave. So before we start, I just wanted to tell everybody, if you haven't heard yet, we just created recently a new YouTube channel called Answering the WMSCOG. And so this is going to be a channel that is entirely devoted to only WMSCOG content. I think with having a separate channel that's completely devoted to this specific group, it's going to give me a little bit more freedom to kind of just put out whatever content I want. And so, I'm not having to saturate the GLS channel with only WMSCOG content. So there will be a lot of content over there in the coming months that you won't be able to see here on this channel. So it would be great, be a big favor if you go and subscribe to that channel. And I'll put a link in the description of this video below. Lastly, I just wanted to say thank you to those of you who are supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Yeah, it's all you guys who are supporting on a monthly basis that is allowing me to continue to make this content. And the more support I have, the more time I'm able to put into making more content. And so, thank you. Appreciate all of you. And with that said, I hope you enjoy Anthony's story. Well, Anthony, welcome to the channel. I really appreciate you taking a day off of work to share your story, and I'm excited to hear it. I listened. You shared your story on the Playing in Traffic podcast already. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. I've been on the Playing in Traffic podcast a couple of times. Okay,
so maybe just to start out here, could you just give us a little bit of a summary, I guess, of as much as you're comfortable giving about like what location, what WMSCOG location were you in, how long were you there, and then when did you get out?
So actually, I was brought into the church in New York and Queens in 2011. And I kind of moved around a little bit. It was pretty early on. Within 4 months, they told me I should go to the Manhattan location. And then after I was there in the church for about a year and a half, they told me I should go down to Tampa, Florida. And I followed them down to Tampa. I was there for, just under a year, went back to New York for a while. It was between Manhattan and Queens. Then I went out to Pittsburgh. And then I was sent over to Baltimore, and I ended my time in 2021 in Virginia.
What was the initial thing that kind of got you introduced to them? And then why was it that you were convinced to join?
So I was, it was just a regular day. At the time in my life, I really didn't have much of a religious base. I wasn't going to church. I was just kind of, living my life, going through the normal mid-20s struggle and, just kind of trying to grow in my career, trying to, figure out what I wanted my life to turn out to be. And that's when I was approached on the 4th of July in New York. And they just asked me if I've ever heard of God the Mother, and the concept I'd never heard of before. It was interesting. So when they, asked me if I would do a Bible study, I agreed to schedule a time to go do a Bible study. And when I went there, first they came out to meet with me at a local place, and then we went to the church. And the first day, they were just teaching me some things I never heard of, things that seemed interesting. They showed me the Bible in a way I hadn't seen before. It felt new, it felt interesting, and I really felt like there was something that I wanted in my life. In a way, it was like more education, to learn something new, to have something that fulfilled me in a like academic way. So I continued to go and I continued to study, and I started to believe the message. I didn't have any intention to really stay for a long time, but they showed me something in a very interesting, different perspective. And my first day, they asked me if I wanted to get baptized, and I didn't see any harm in it. I had never been baptized before. And after that, I kind of had a little bit of like an obligation feeling to continue my studies and to learn more. And the more I came, the more I studied, the more I started to have a fear, and the more I started to have a faith in what they were teaching. And, it's the only time I've really been reading the Bible. So I didn't really have anything to base it off of, but I felt like I was starting to see something. And then they kind of introduced this teaching to me that the end of the world's coming very soon. And I felt like I just came into this place at the perfect time. Like I just made it, because it was 2011. And at the time, everyone was talking about how the next year was the end of the world. So I just felt like I have to, put myself 100% into this, because even if you're a member of the church, they teach, just coming to the church alone is not enough. You have to excel as a member in order to get to the kingdom of heaven. So I just started, and, with that fear and that, little bit of faith I had at the very beginning, I just started going full force into the church. And, it was really because I just thought, okay, I have, a year and a half until the end of the world at most. So, fully commit yourself, and, this is it. And it was very fast. I was really shocked, because within 4 months of being in the church, I had a roommate and a friend I had for years. And I said, I want to move out, and I want to move in with church members. So it was very quick how involved they got into the church.
So what then became your experience in the church? I mean, how did joining the WMS affect you emotionally, and just as an overall person, relationally with family? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, circling back to some of the fear, it was pretty early on I started to have nightmares, because they talked about global destruction, atomic bombs. So, on my earliest time in the church, I started to have that, those haunting nightmares about the end of the world and destruction, and, being in New York City, where I was living at the time, and having, buildings collapse all around you. So I started to live in this constant state of fear. Also, one of the things that they teach, there's one of the first studies that they teach you is a heavenly family and earthly family. So in that study, it talks about a reality and a shadow. There's the reality, which is, they say, the spiritual world, and this earth is nothing but a shadow. So in the reality, there's your real father, your real mother, which they say is God, and then your real brothers and sisters, the church members. This earth is just a shadow, which has very little value, but you can look at it to understand the reality. So whatever love your parents have for you is just like a shadow compared to the reality that is the love God has for you. Whatever your relationship is with your siblings is just a shadow of the real love in the church. So you start to underappreciate your physical, your family, your actual family. They call it the physical family versus spiritual family. So at that moment, they start to introduce this teaching where however much you love your physical family, it's nothing compared to the spiritual. So you become more and more like dull to your family relationships and your friends. And, the first thing you try to do is invite them to the church. But as soon as they reject you, you just kind of feel like you need to move on, especially considering how limited time you're told that you have. So why waste your time on somebody who's not going to accept? Your relationship, they teach, is only on this earth. When the end comes, you have no emotion towards those people anymore. They're just another soul. It's not your mom. It's not your sister. It's not your brother. It's just a different soul. That bond is broken when you die. So that's the kind of teaching that they have. So slowly I just started to separate myself from everybody.
I guess that sort of goes into the manipulative kind of way that they go about doing things, because it's not as if they just kind of to your face plainly state, hey, you need to leave your family and, give all your time to us and don't spend any time. They don't say it clearly, but they utilize their doctrines and theology and kind of hang them over your head to where, it's as if they allow you to make that decision. But, it's so rooted in all the fear and all the coercive things they're teaching you. And so you have the WMSCOG now making these response videos saying, no, we don't do that, and anybody who tells you that is Satan and lying and whatnot. So I mean, how would you respond to them when they say that kind of stuff?
I know exactly the cartoon video that you're speaking about. The cartoon video is about cult experts and how cult experts are the reason why families break up, not because of the church itself. Now, in that cartoon, actually, you see that the family, they had no objection to the church. They all loved it. And that's when somebody influenced the mom. But usually that's not how it happens. Usually from the very beginning, the family is, they scratch their heads and they're kind of curious about, like, what is this teaching? Like, why is it absorbing your life so much? Why are you so different? Why are you not caring about things you used to care about? And, they come up with their own sorts of concerns on their own. But they make these claims that the church doesn't break up families. But in reality, one, they absorb all your time. You, of course, have to go on Saturday for the full day. And then Tuesday night, you have to go. And then Sunday is the day for preaching. So maybe you have a little time in the morning, but you have to go for basically the whole day. So there goes your weekend. And then Friday night, you have to go because it's preparation day. You have to go clean the church. And then what about the other days during the week? There's always an activity, whether it be, this day we're going to get together and do a group Bible study. This day we're going to go preaching. So you're not home. You're literally away from your family. And the only time it doesn't separate you from your family is if your family chooses to follow this church as well. So sometimes, families get stuck having to go to the church if they want to see their kid or if they want to see their sibling, because it's taking up all their time. But if you don't agree with the teachings, and most Christians wouldn't, and anyone who really studies the Bible and can see the sort of manipulation that they're doing to the scripture, they're not going to feel comfortable going. And then, for me, it was, they start to relocate you from place to place. They're always shuffling members from, one place to another place. I had no family in Tampa. I was there, in the church about a year. And that's when they moved me down to a completely different state. I had nobody by me. And, then they shuffle people all around, and they're physically not near their family, but emotionally too. They downplay the importance of your physical family. And, from there, it's just the separation begins. You don't call them. You don't have a conversation with them. You separate yourself entirely. So the way that the church, teaches the teachings about your family, they try to cover it up. They try to teach They have like things like Happy Home, which is like a little magazine that they've released trying to show how to live your family life and the sorts of ways you need to, interact with them. They've created like new things in response to this in order to try to cover their tracks. But it's only until recently that they've been, allowing members to have scheduled time to visit their family. But ultimately, the purpose that they give you to go visit family is just to preach to them. Like if they give you Thanksgiving, which they used to ban, now it's just go to your family and preach to them.
Yeah. So it's not only that they get you to separate from your family through their coercive methods, but so it's not only that, it's like this double layered thing, because the relationship, whatever elements of it you have left with your family, what they teach you and tell you about them causes that dynamic to be one of you seeing them as nothing more than a project or a goal, a fruit to try to bear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, oftentimes, if you do visit family, and this is really how my family started to feel, is we want to see you and hang out with you. But every time you're around, you find a way to bring up your church or try to pull out the Bible or, try to scare us or try to make us believe something that we don't believe. So it gets annoying for them too, I'm sure. Because now, like when you go visit them, it's never just a conversation. It's never just, talking about the family, talking about life. It's talking about the church. And then that's another part of it too, is if you're not a member of the church, if you're just a family member on the outside, you're not really going to understand what life is like as a church member. All the different sacrifices, all the different times we have to wake up at like 4:00 in the morning to get to 4:30 at the church for a 5 a.m. service. It's just, they don't understand this. So I found myself lying to my family a lot. I couldn't tell them about my life. I couldn't explain what I was going through. I couldn't tell them how I'm sick because I was out in the freezing cold preaching in the rain. I can't explain any of this stuff to them. So lying to them also made me feel a little bit further away from my family. And because they just wouldn't be able to understand, what was happening in my life. So, it caused a bit of a divide, because I didn't want the church to be viewed in a negative light either. So if they saw like what kind of life I was living, they would definitely raise concern. So I just had to lie to them about what happened in my life.
What are kind of some of the experiences that maybe would come to mind, experiences with leaders or with other members that kind of began to show you the true nature maybe of what was really at the heart of this group?
Well, one of the early signs, there was a situation when I was in Manhattan. I told the story on the Play in Traffic podcast, but there was a time where we were all in the church, and then suddenly the church leader told all the female members to get out of the room. Now, he lined us all up, shoulder to shoulder, and there was a good amount of the male members, and it kind of made like a curve, like from one wall turned to another wall. And he started yelling and screaming that he found, like, a child found a used condom inside of the bathroom. And, whose was it? He started to call out people and scream, was it you? You have a problem with sexual immorality? Or have you been masturbating? Have you been going like member to member, throwing accusations at them? And then finally, this one member stood up and he's like, it was mine. He said that, he didn't realize he had it on him from the night before. I don't know the story. It's a weird story, but he threw it out and some kid was in the bathroom and saw it in the garbage. and, brought it up, and he started screaming at him, you're going to kill your soul. You're going to kill your brother's soul. You're going to kill that child's soul, his mother's soul, all of his family's soul. Everyone's going to die. And then he took the guy's bag, his preaching bag, and flipped it upside down, dumped out all the contents all over the floor. And he started to take the books and the Bible. And he's like, you don't need this. You don't need this. Then he called his actual, his physical brother, and made him stand there and say, should your brother be allowed to stay in this church and go to heaven? And the brother had to say, no, he shouldn't be allowed to, go to heaven. So it was like, at that moment, I just felt so uncomfortable about the whole situation. And like, if you saw how loud and how red this guy got as he was screaming, it was just like the worst feeling. And I was like, inside, you want to say something, you want to like say that this isn't right. Mm-hmm. But if you spoke up at that moment, you'd have the fear that you'd get kicked out, and then, you'd go to hell, so you just have to deal with this sort of awful thing and just witness it. After a while, I realized that anyone in sort of a leadership position, they're educated that they were selected by God Almighty, that what they do is what is right, that God chose them for a reason. So they have this elevated ego. So they feel like they can talk to people however they want. And they also have this example, the leader that they had, at least on the East Coast, he constantly would scream at people, would constantly belittle people publicly. And, then all the little minions under him learned the same exact tactic. And then they started to bring this bad culture to all the members too. I know that the East Coast was known to be a lot more harsh than other locations, but it was definitely very, very difficult. And I think the more that it was exposed after time, the softer that they had to become, because this stuff was getting out there. And then they started to teach that it was a prophecy. They started to say, oh, that was the Peter days. Now we're in the Paul days. Peter, he said, Jesus, I don't want you to get hurt. And he said, you're Satan, get away from me. But to Paul was killing members of the church. And it was, why do you persecute me? So it was a softer time. Like, we're evolving as a church. We have a different group of members now. So in today's church, they try to cover their tracks a little bit and soften the way that they attack people. But now it's done more in private than publicly. There were some other leaders just like him, but this one, he had a pattern of that. Actually, we went to, he was a leader who went to Florida when I went to Florida. He led the church down there. And actually, he did something like that to me. Not, involving the same sort of reasoning, but he did like a public ridicule to me, and he made a very uncomfortable situation. And then when, I let the pastor know how it was, he basically said, well, I went to that church and everyone seems happy. So, I don't really believe what you're saying. But I'm like, they didn't realize that the way that the church members treated the regional pastor, they treated him like he was God. Like I remember that was like one of the weird things when I first came. They would tell me, oh, the pastor's coming. And I'm like, okay, like, what's the big deal? And when he'd come, they would just not speak. They would like sit all around him. And just whatever he said, they would be like, wow. Like it was just, he could say the most, bland thing, and everybody was just, wow, because, I think it was like the group setting, and they were trained to view anything he said as like this words of wisdom. So, when he said, oh, I went there and everyone seemed happy, everyone put on a show for him. Everyone acted like they were happy, because if they acted unhappy, how would he react to them? What would he say about them and their spiritual status? So, there was definitely a lot of showmanship done from the members to put on a front, especially depending on which leader was there, because they didn't want to be viewed as the disgruntled or unhappy member who complained about God's church.
Steve Hassan or Hassan, I never know how to say his last name, but I'm sure you're familiar with the bite model and his stuff on undue influence. So I just have a little definition of undue influence pulled up. So undue influence is a psychological process by which a person's free will and judgment is supplanted by that of another. So, I mean, when you hear that, do you feel like you can look back and see in your experience that your free will and judgment was supplanted by this group?
Anytime I was going to make a life decision, I would have to go to the leader. So, I had the free will to get a new job or to relocate or to get a new apartment, or if I wanted to get a pet, or if I wanted, like, whatever it might be, every decision I'd have to go to the leader and talk to them about it. I didn't feel comfortable. If I wanted to go on vacation to visit my family, as rare as it might be, or if I had to go on a business trip, I had to go to the leader and talk about it with them and have them make the decision, have them make the call for me. It was always, I had to put my own free will second and get the permission of the leader. So, it was definitely a system where I couldn't really do what I wanted to do. And then there were times definitely where, I disagreed with, when I was taking care of members, the method that we had to provide to care for the members, things we had to say to them. Sometimes I personally didn't agree with the message, but I had to be the one who pretended like I agreed with the message in order to deliver it to them. So, there's definitely parts where you say, I'm a sinner. Like, they teach that's like, teaching number one is that you are a sinner that left the kingdom of heaven. You were knocked out because of your free will, your choice, your own mind. So now you're given an opportunity to learn God's methods, God's ways. So whenever you have something that disagrees with the church, well, it's your sinful nature going against God. And that's why you didn't get to stay in heaven in the first place. And you'll never go back unless you can conform to God's plan, to God's, point of view. So whatever thoughts you had that might differ from the church, you aligned your actions and you made your thoughts go with the church in order that, you can not be led away from God, again.
Yeah, right. It's like what they do is cause you to be your own jailer or your own, slave master, however you want to put it. You're coerced and manipulated into, locking yourself into this thing.
Yeah, they definitely have that kind of power over you. I say it's like a system where they make robots who make robots. Mm-hmm. They train you to become like this, think how they program you to think, and then teach others to do the same. So it's, constantly one person teaching another person to follow this robotic, pattern of submission to ultimately this really destructive teaching that they have.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Just that fear of yourself that they instill in you, that kind of becomes this mental fencing, that keeps you in. You're afraid of your own sinfulness, and obviously hell is sort of at the foundation of that. The fear of hell being a consequence of if you let that terrible thing inside of you, outside of that fence. And so,
yeah, you're able to think for yourself, and they teach you not to. It's like they have these like shut off switches that they built into your brain that prohibit you from having free thought. So the moment you start to have a question, you shut it down. And even sometimes, though, there might be a member who actually, somehow bypasses that and asks a question. And the result of that is terrible. There was one time we were doing a study where the theology that they were teaching was that when Jesus resurrected, he was not in the physical flesh. He was in like a transfigured, different sort of body. And somebody asked, well, then why did he still have the piercings on his hands and his feet? And they spoke to him privately about it. But then after he had that question, the leader talked to all the leaders and said, oh, I thought that this member had better faith than that. He asked this question. And now all the leaders know that that brother has something wrong with his spirit, with his mind. He's questioning God's word. And now all the leadership starts to treat that brother differently because now they know that he's the one questioning. So now if he's near a new member, they do some awkward, let's separate them, because they call it something called spiritual gangrene, where they think that, his doubt, his question, that simple question is going to infect. Yeah. So they separate that member from the other members in order to prevent, further questioning from spreading through the church. And now this member, he asks a question and now he sees a result. This is what happens when you ask a question. You get treated differently. So what should you do in the future? Just, say, okay, well, if the church told me this is the way it is, this is the way it is, don't question it, just follow. Because otherwise you're going to get shunned. So it's really intricate, but they know what they're doing.
Narcissism, the whole idea of narcissism, especially as it relates to religion and spiritual individual leaders or organizations that kind of function according to sort of the patterns of narcissists. That's something that I'm really kind of fascinated in right now. But narcissism is something that's it's largely, I think, driven by insecurity, and so that's just all this stuff that you're saying here about how this member has a question and how they respond to that sort of thing. It just shows the deep insecurity of this group. Would you agree with that?
I definitely think there is narcissism involved, 100%. One of the ways is, you're right, they are very insecure, but then they teach you as a member that there are certain consequences. That's why they need to act that way. For instance, if a member has a question, or there's something that might view the church in a negative light, they're very protective over that information, and they need to squash it, because if that information causes somebody to question and that question causes them to leave, they will then teach everybody, well, what's the result is that the person goes to hell. So that's why we need to have information control out there. That's why, anyone speaking negatively about the church, we need to stop them, because they are going to send people to hell. So that's the way that they teach it. So when members witness information control, they agree with it. They think that there should be information control because they are told that the consequences are so high. That's why we need to live in this severe state. So, and then also part of the narcissism is the fact that they could never be wrong. No matter how wrong that they may be, they never allow themselves to be seen as the one who was wrong. So they'll do some philosophical gymnastics in order that the member was the one wrong, not the church.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, that's they show a complete lack of humility because they have failures, they have failings, they have things that happen that contradict previous teachings or prophecies or proclamations, and they never admit to it, do they? They never come out and say, look, we see this, we know we got this wrong here, or we messed this up here, and this is how we're going to adjust. This is how we apologize, we're adjusting, we realize that now we're going to move forward. Instead, like you're saying, they gaslight and they usually they throw the members under the bus for many
it's true.
of the things, but
it's always the members' fault. It's also it comes to, like, if something goes well, oh, it's the power of God, who can stop these men? You'll find yourself fighting against God. They use that verse. I think you've referenced it a few times. When things go well, when things don't go well, oh, the world is under the control of the devil. Mm-hmm. That's why, the world is persecuting us. So no matter how things fall, they always say that, this is, either we're going to do well because we're with God, or we're going to do bad because we're with God. Like, no matter what, they have.
Yep. They're always on top. They set themselves to always come out on the top, and they manipulate the Bible and twist it and contort it to make it to where whatever happens, if it comes out that Zhang Gil Jah is revealed as a mass murdering, psychopathic lunatic, they would find a way to make that into some kind of prophecy. God's wrath. God's wrath. Horrible. Yeah,
it's true. They definitely have a way to always change what happened to fit a narrative. No matter what the result is, it could go either way, and they'll explain it away and just say this is what God said would happen, even though it's contradictory results.
Yep, exactly. So how did your story then kind of play out? What happened? What led you to where you are now, sitting here, having gone from a member who was fully committed to making a video on Great Light Studios, speaking out against this church? Yeah, right.
Well, so eventually in the 2013, after the failed prophecy, the time I was having down in Florida was really difficult. That leader that I had mentioned to you previously, he was making it very difficult for me down there. So I went back to New York for a while, and after the 2012 failed doomsday, there was a 2014 failed doomsday. This one was called the Year of Jubilee. The Year of Jubilee, they say it's 50 years after the establishment of the church. So, in the Bible, that 50th year, anyone who was enslaved can return back to their home. So anyone who was under, this working condition, all debts were forgiven, you go back home. And they were teaching that this is that year. And then, they showed about Jesus on the Sabbath day. He proclaimed about the Year of Jubilee. And so they basically told us that this year we get to go back home. This year, all debts are forgiven. We go back. So that was the way it was kind of presented. I mean, not as intensely as 2012, but, that didn't work out. So, time went by, there's a bunch of different projects I was working on. I went out to Pittsburgh to help them with their new church location. And they had me become a church leader in Baltimore. So I relocated again to another city and state. And, I grew from there in the church. At that point, I wasn't just like a team leader or a gospel worker. Now I was a church leader. And then in 2019, they gave me the title of deacon. I was a baptizer. So I had to drive around the region to help baptize and support the churches with whatever baptisms in different locations. And then the pandemic hit, 2020. I was at that point in what they call the theological school, where it was like a training for them to advance you to become like an assistant overseer or overseer and work full time for the church. And around that time, that's when I had, there's a lot more free time at home. And my sister, she was going through a difficult time in her life. So I'd call her and reach out to her more and more. And I started to remember a little bit more about who I was. The real identity versus the cult, given identity started to resurface. I started to concern and ask about my family members. I started to, remember, maybe my grandmother's getting older and I should spend more time with her. And, all this stuff started to come into my mind. And, by 2021, I was really starting to have my doubts. I was also getting to the point where I was going to hit my 10 years. And every year I was told, this is the last year, this is the last year, and I'm like, well, 10 years is a lot of time for it to be the last year. That's a lot of last years. And I started to, say, okay, you know what? Let me start to understand things a little bit deeper. If this is the truth, it's going to hold up to whatever sort of research I might, find. And the more I dug in, I started to realize there were things that they were teaching that were incorrect. Times and dates and things like that they say were part of prophecy didn't line up with what actually occurred in history. Teachings that they had in the Bible, if you just read the context of it, it ended up, that's not what the verse was talking about at all. I started this, really read the Bible on its own, not just in like little strips here and there that they tell you to read, but actually read it. Book of Galatians, the book of Romans, and the way that it spoke about what happened with the law, that it was just like temporarily given to the people, that it's not something that we keep forever. I started to do the math with, different things that they said against Sunday worship. And, I actually had preached, had a Bible study with somebody who was a devout Catholic who actually brought up a lot of points I'd never considered. And a lot of the doubts I had about the verses I'd use, he brought up in our Bible study. And it really got me thinking that if somebody else could defend their faith so much, so well, just as well as I can. And now here I am like 9-10 years in with a title, and I'm a baptizing, and I'm one of the best teachers at the location. And, this person is giving me very valid reasons why they believe what they believe. Well, how many other places can do the same thing? Tell you exactly what they believe and why they believe. And I just realized I'm no different from anyone else in the world. I'm no different from a Mormon or Jehovah's Witness or Catholic or what other faith there might be out there. I'm really no different. I'm no smarter, no better, no more worthy. And all these people believe their faith just as strongly as I believe mine. So I started to look into groups that I would know were cultic and see what they believed and why they believed it, and saw that they had the same sort of backup and proof and, countermeasures as we did. So that kind of helped open my eyes that, this church isn't unique. They teach, no one else can teach the way that we teach. Well, the Shincheonji church teaches exactly how you teach. The Moonies teach exactly how you teach. Actually, a lot of the teaching from Ahnsahnghong, he copied from the Moonies. So, I thought it was unique because I wasn't exposed. But then I started to see that, the teachings really aren't that unique. The methods that they use aren't unique. It's just something that's very common out there. I just had no idea because I was restricted from looking it up. So once I was able to see what else was out there, that's when I started to realize that this is just another group, just like all those other groups. So that kind of helped me realize. Then I had to come up with overcoming my pride. And, I spent 10 years telling everybody, you're wrong, you're going to hell. I'm right. I found the truth. And now what am I going to do? Like, I had this pride. Like, how am I going to tell my family? Like, I've been away from them for so long. I've been neglecting them for so long because I'm following this church. And now I'm wrong. I had this pride. And what about everyone in my life? Because the only people in my life at that point were church members. I'm going to have to walk away from everyone in my life because here it is. Like, I believe something like this to be false. They cut people off who disagree with them. So, if they'd cut off their family, they would cut off me in a heartbeat. So, realizing all that I would give up in order to separate myself from a church that I realized was false, that was probably the biggest struggle and took me a really long time. I would say almost a year for me to make that step. I kept on going back and forth. But ultimately, I decided to leave because I realized it was wrong.
So it was, you're wanting to avoid having to admit to your family that you had been wrong for about 10 years that kept you in. It wasn't, were there like doctrinal hangups? Were there things about the church that still kept you saying, well, there is still this prophecy, or what about this thing here? Or by that point, had you kind of completely rebutted in your head, at least, all the major arguments and prophecies?
I think that I still had the what if, and the what if didn't go away for a while. That also kept me in. What if this is right? I was doing like, what if this is a prophecy? What if that's a prophecy? What if this year it's going to be the end? What if that year is going to be the end? And it just kind of kept me stuck. But I've been stuck since 2012, and they tell you in 2012 that, well, if you're so concerned about times and dates, then, you're not worthy of the kingdom of heaven, So I just kept on, debating whether or not I should stay and see if this is, if their prophecies are going to come true, if in time, the world will end like they say it's going to, or if I just cut my losses of 10 years and start to try to figure out what I want to do with my life, as, everyone's life is you're slowly heading towards the grave. I'm given a finite time on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
So do I really want to spend it, doing things I don't think, are going to benefit me? Am I going to go out and preach to people and make them as miserable as I am by bringing them into the church? What am I supposed to do at this time? So that's why I decided I need to leave, even though the what ifs were there. What if I'm wrong? What if this is correct? You start to realize though after time that this church is really nothing in the broad world. It seems so big in your eyes through their propaganda videos, through these church videos that they give you, but it's really not that big of a church. And they say 3-point-something million people, but that number is definitely inflated. You count how many people are in the church and you count how many churches they actually have, and that would be about 400 people per church or some math like that. And there's definitely churches where it's 5 people, and the biggest church that I've seen is maybe 200. So
okay.
Their numbers are off.
So the what if questions. One helpful way I think that people could deal with the what ifs, and I'm curious if this kind of was something that was involved in you being able to be free from the what ifs, is kind of going back to what you were saying a few minutes ago about how you were able to look around at all these other religions and groups who were arguing and thinking and in so much of the same way that you were, who were committed to their specific brand of religion, just as you were. So I think with the what if questions, one thing that might be helpful is for people to be able to look around and realize that people who leave Mormonism, they're plagued by those same what if questions of, well, what if this is true? What if Joseph Smith was really, what if the Book of Mormon, what if, and it'd be the same with Jehovah's Witnesses or Shincheonji members. So you can look around and see that, there's nothing unique about this situation that I'm in. There's nothing unique about these what if questions and these fears. And if all these people and all these different beliefs are feeling and experiencing the same thing, that's at least should cause you to step back and really deeply question the legitimacy of those what ifs, and if there's really much substance, is there really a good reason to think there's a whole lot of substance behind those fears that are driving those questions? If you're able to look around and see that people from all these different belief systems are feeling the same exact thing. So did you have sort of those thoughts? Was that something that played into your ability to kind of move on from those fears?
Absolutely. Actually, I was watching some testimonials from people who left those sorts of religions, and the way that they explained their experience in their churches, the way that they felt leaving the churches, the way that, they were like excommunicated, shunned, called an apostate, all these different things that were done to them on their leaving, the way that they came in with love bombing. All of the things that I experienced, I could see it happen in all these other groups as well. So once I started to see that the environment was also the same and what happened to them after they left, it made me more comfortable, because then I can see my experience. It's something that just cults do. That's when I realized some people have a hard time using the word cult when they're leaving, but that actually was what helped me leave, is to realize when I started to see what cults were, that kind of opened my eyes that, oh, wow, this actually is a cult. It works the exact same way. And then once their teaching started to fall apart, there was nothing keeping me.
Yeah. Because then you can kind of see you can kind of see the wizard behind the curtain, sort of.
Yeah.
When you start to unpack those things, and the loud wizard with this powerful booming voice, but then you pull back the curtain and see it's just this weak old man.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like a cardboard cutout where it seems as if there's a person there, a real live person, but then you start to unpack the doctrines and untangle and really start to just be able to clearly identify that, this is a cult, and the reason I'm thinking this way, feeling this way, having this fear is because that's what cults like this do. And so it's kind of like you're able to turn that cardboard cutout on its side and see that, this is just a cardboard cutout. There's nothing really here. Yeah.
That's very true. Once you start to see what it actually is, then you have less fear about it, because the same tricks are used. There's a method that works, and that's why it exists across the board in all these different cult groups, is because this is what they do. And that's why they also try to give that cartoon that you brought up, to get people to look at Steve Hassan as like, this awful person who's like an agent of Satan. Because if you look at his work or any of the other cult expert work, then you'll start to realize what they're teaching is something that's seen in many different churches that are, cult churches. And then that's going to open your eyes to the way in which this church operates. And, it's actually funny. They gave a video. They gave a couple of videos speaking against Steve Hassan. And in the videos, they say this woman, Dr. Mann, they say that she spoke negatively about his bite model. But even this doctor, they're like, oh, well, he's just has a master's degree. She has a doctorate. When they have, her quote speaking a criticism of his bite model, even she, that doctor, went out and said that the Church of God, the World Mission Society, is a cult. So even this, the quote that they tried to use in their defense, even that lady spoke against the church. So,
yeah. So how did the leadership respond to your doubts and questions? Did you take any of those things that you started to uncover? Did you take those questions, those problems to the other members? I guess, you were kind of higher up, so you didn't have probably a ton of people above you to bring these things to, but how did all that play out with your questions and doubts with the other members?
Well, the way that it started to work is very early on in my first year of being at the church, I was put into an arranged marriage with someone from Korea. And, having a Korean wife in a Korean cult gave you certain pieces of information. So she had a direct access over to the General Assembly through one of her positions that she had in the church. So I would talk to her about it. And then, just like any sort of cult group, I thought maybe I could confide in her and speak to her, and it would just stay between us. But then she took my questions and she brought it up to other people, and that was really like a big betrayal in my mind. But she did take a couple of my questions that I had and presented it to the General Assembly of the church in Korea, who then, gave like a printout explanation of, what their response is to my questions. And, after that, I started to try to transfer out from Maryland into Virginia. And instantly, even while I was still attending, all the Maryland members started to cut me off. Like, they wouldn't respond to text messages. And I'm like, I'm still here. I'm still a member. I'm not, but they knew that I had these questions. So they started to cut off the Maryland members from me. I went over to Virginia, and it was a very like uncomfortable situation, going to a different location where if I had these questions, it was given to General Assembly. All the leadership knew, they were all talking about it. So now, it was a very uncomfortable situation, because the way that they deal with somebody with any sort of like question, like I mentioned before, they try to separate you and keep you under a very watchful eye. So I stopped going for all the extracurriculars and just went for services. And that was kind of on my way out.
So you mentioned something about them creating like this printout that responded to your questions.
Yes.
I'm guessing you don't still have that, right?
So they had a Korean version and an English version. My wife had given me the English version to look at, and she then wanted to take it back, after I had time to read it. So like maybe I had it for 10 minutes, but I took a picture of it when she stepped away. So I have a
copy. Take it back.
Yeah, then I wouldn't have a copy of what they said, because they want to keep sort of stuff under wraps.
Yeah, because if they realize later on that there were problems with something they said, they can deny that they ever said it, or
exactly. Okay. So,
but you do have a picture of it.
Yes, of their response, and it was about things that maybe we could get into when we talk about their doctrine and issues.
Yeah, we will be doing a part 2 where we'll maybe talk more specifically about some of the arguments or the doubts you had, the problems that you began to see, and kind of mention those specifically, and kind of let you articulate how you began to see that they don't really hold up to scrutiny. So go ahead.
I was going to say that, the other thing is, once you start to have the doubts and you're in the church, you start to realize things more that maybe you neglected, things that you'd be surrounded by before, but now you start to pick up on things that you didn't pick up on before. Like, one of the things is there's always an ever-changing bar of what it takes to get into the kingdom of heaven. I always just felt before that it was my problem, that I'm never going to reach, I have to keep working, keep giving, keep sacrificing. And eventually I'm going to get to that point. But the thing is, to keep raising the bar, even to the point where they gave us a study and they said that if we don't smile in the church, we don't go to heaven. So like it's never ending with their expectations of you. And then if you ever question it, if you say, oh, well, I'm here, they'll just put the bar on a little bit higher level. So you're always chasing that, like just a little bit more, but you're never good enough. You're never going to get to that point. And it's exhausting. It really is.
So you were still in when I was making these videos. I think the first video I put out was in 2018, if I'm remembering that right. But did you ever come across the Great Light Studios videos while you were a member?
I had seen things like pop up. I think one of the interesting things in why they tell the members that if you're going to watch the videos of the church sermons, don't go to YouTube, go to the website and watch the YouTube video through the website, is because you start to pop up. Other people start to pop up too when you have like WMSCOG or the full name of the church. Your videos pop up. Other people who spoke against the church pop up. Actually, one of them who spoke up was somebody I brought into the church. So I was kind of curious, but he made his own channel itself. He was never on your channel, but
so like a friend that you had, somebody that you brought into the church, began
just somebody that we appreciated them on the street, and they came, and then they ended up leaving, and then they started making videos against the church, and I his videos would pop up. So I tried to avoid watching and listening, but towards the end, when I was really trying to understand what was out there, there were some of your videos that I would watch. I found it really helpful to hear your perspective when you talked about like the fig tree lesson, and I think there was a few different things that you made that were you really hit the point in a way that like resonated with me. The one thing that turned me off a little bit at the beginning was when you say Ahnsahnghong, because it looks like that's how it's pronounced. So immediately, this guy doesn't know, and but then I'm like, well, let me go back and listen anyway. So it was a little bit of of a back and forth, but eventually I was able to start to listen, especially once I made the decision to leave. It brought a lot of comfort to be able to listen and to realize, but it was very helpful for me to make that final decision. And then after I left, helping me with my decision that I had made. So
kind of deconstructing.
Exactly. So, I guess this is a good opportunity to thank you for the work that you do to help these, people in the church, family members, and the content that you put out. I know it's not easy to, in your free time, do all this. So I appreciate you, working on this and putting this out, because it helped me, and I know it helped a lot of people. So,
well, thank you for saying that. I wasn't fishing for a thank you. I really appreciate that. It's always just interesting to hear. I think mainly because, I don't get an opportunity to sit with current members and talk like this. 99% of them refuse to have a phone call or video call or whatever, when I'd love to do that. But it's just interesting to hear from kind of that side, like how do members perceive what's happening? Like you're saying, when you type in WMSCOG on YouTube, it's kind of funny, but you can look at like these different analytics, that you can attach to like Google. And I haven't checked it for a while, but last I checked, both the keyword World Mission Society Church of God and WMSCOG, the top channels for those keywords is Great Light Studios, which is just, it's a good accomplishment, because what you can tell the World Mission Society Church of God just seems to pump out as much content as they possibly can. And Jeremy Burgos, who knows more about that side of things, has discovered some evidence that would seem to allude to that they're, maybe paying for views or likes or whatever. But yeah, it's just interesting to kind of hear how, from that perspective, how you kind of perceive the channel and the videos and seeing the former members speaking and all that.
I would say that when I was, in the early days, I would say just even seeing like, your face or Michelle or Kelsey, Steve, who you have on sometimes, just, it would be so angry as a member, I would be so like frustrated and it just, seeing the face just made me angry. And now I know that people are going to see my face and be like, oh, that jerk, that awful guy. It that fades away once they start to realize that who the actual jerk really is the ones who are manipulating the church members. But, I felt a lot of hostility for a while against you guys, but
I bet,
listening and realizing you guys aren't bad people, you're helping people. So,
well, thanks for saying all that. It's always great to hear how people are being helped. I think, on multiple sides of it, it's like on that side of it, it's creating anger in members and stirring things up. But I think especially with the former member testimonies like yours, which is why what you're doing right now is so important. I think these are the things that, hearing from you guys who were in it, who walked in it, where they can relate to your experiences. I think those are the things that would leave members probably more often, current members, with really something to think about, and something that I think a seed that will, grow hopefully in the future. But so we'll continue doing it.
And I also I put myself out there. If there's anybody who, one of the things that I found when I was leaving, and I was in this state of fear and worry, was having a community, having people to speak to who were former members. I reached out to you very early on, and you connected me with Kelsey, and then I listened to the Playing in Traffic and reached out to them, and then they connected me to somebody else, and just having like these conversations with people who've been through it. I think that, whether it be listening through the YouTube channel, but, I'm also, very open to, if anyone has a question or if they want to have a conversation, about it, if they're in, if they're out, if they're struggling, I'm very open to have these chats with people.
Yeah. I've had the thought recently about maybe, I know there's a handful of Facebook pages and stuff, but I've wondered if creating a Facebook page or a Discord server or something like that, where people can kind of have some community. That might be something that we can I can work on it. And I think, because there's a lot of people I know just coming out of this, having other people too who can relate to you, who you can talk to, and just being able to see other people who have come out and gone through it and are still, healthy, functioning, happy, I think is just, a hugely helpful thing for people.
Yeah. They hate that. They hate when people leave and then they do well. For me, I think having the community helped me do a quick rebound, get my life back on track and going forward. But I know that whenever somebody leaves and then their life doesn't go well, they're plagued with PTSD a lot of the times. And, they're going through these awful things, and then maybe they end up having a hard time in life. They rejoice at that. They love to say, oh, look how miserable this person looks. Look how sad this person is. Oh, this person left and they were in a car accident. I remember one of the things that I was really shocked about, probably in 2014, there was a young girl with her boyfriend who went there. She was a member. The boyfriend was baptized as a member. They went down to go to a graduation, and then they were in a really bad car accident because the car accident happened on a Tuesday. So they're like, well, they were there and they weren't going to go to third day service. So she's in a coma, and he had one of his lungs crushed, And that's because they were skipping third day. And, it was almost like, look at God's power, and it's just so dark. It's such a dark thing for them to think and consider. It was, that's pretty rough for skipping a Tuesday night service.
Yeah, I'd say, and that's a pretty rough perspective on the character of God. I mean, that the first thing you go to when these people that you should deeply care about and love as your brothers and sisters, your spiritual family, oh well, they get what they deserve. Pretty much is kind of what they communicated there.
Some of the things, like, in the heartlessness that they have, towards different people in different situations. I know that one of the topics you talk about is like their mistreatment of the homeless population. Mm-hmm. And, in their perspective, like, never preach to a homeless person, because they don't say they're bad because they're homeless. They say they're homeless because they're bad. Mm-hmm. That's their mind. They sinned in heaven so bad that they're put in this bad situation. It's their punishment. And now they'll never be able to hear because of what they did in heaven. They'll never have salvation because they're bad people. That's how they view the homeless. So, like, they have this heartlessness towards a lot of groups of people. So, it's just they say whenever we don't want to preach to somebody's not good. It's, it's because they're a sinner from heaven and this is their punishment. They'll never, even though they're here in the flesh, they'll never get the opportunity. Yeah.
And what a perfect example that is of just how biblically ignorant this organization is. I mean, just go read through the New Testament, any book pretty much, and you're going to discover a reoccurring, prevalent, focused on theme of caring for, loving the lowly, the less than, those who are the poor and the needy, the orphan and the widow. They have what now?
They have a workaround for that. They say, who are the poor is those that don't have the gospel, those who don't know about the Passover, who don't have God the Mother. Those are the poor, not physically poor, spiritually poor. So that's how they justify it. The whole world out there, they don't have the riches because God is the treasure in the field. God is your wealth. So if you don't have that, all the world is poor, and we have to go and help all those who don't know God. That's how we give to the poor. So they have a workaround, but it's only spiritual when they want it spiritual. It's not spiritual tithe. No, that's physical money. That's physical. You don't tithe 10% of your spirit, or it's always how they want to look at it. So it's they're very picky and choosy, but they use it's spiritual a lot to work
serves them
around. Exactly, when they don't want to listen to some of the teachings of the Bible.
Yeah. Which again, I mean, that workaround doesn't work around. I mean, because you could go to Acts or Galatians or many places again in the New Testament where you just see that when there is mention of giving to the poor, in Acts it talks about how they would I think it's in Acts somewhere where it's very specifically mentioned that giving physical provision to the poor is what displays somebody having true love.
Even the physically injured, like the blind, for instance, they say, it's the spiritually blind that we must help. It's the cripple, the one whose legs don't work. Oh, that's because the legs don't listen to the brain, and the head is Christ. So it's the person who doesn't listen to Christ. That's the cripple. So they give this stuff, but you'd never see them preach to an actual blind person or an actual crippled person, unless, of course, maybe if they're related to a member, and then it's still kind of like, why'd you bring them?
Yeah. But Anthony, I thought that we were supposed to follow the example of Christ, right? And they And so how do they work around that? Because the example of Christ, he didn't just, he healed physical eyes. He healed physical, those who were physically crippled. So how would they work around that? Because again, it's like, well, when just a normal average person picks up the Bible, this idea that you neglect the physical needs of people is a bit bizarre.
Yeah, it's through the physical we can understand the spiritual. That's always he gave us a physical example to show us what he's doing spiritually. He cured the blind man on the Sabbath day. That's why, when we go on the Sabbath day, our spiritual eyes can be open to see. That's the blessing of the Sabbath. So that's
oh man.
Yeah.
Such a good example of how they just, when it works for them, they're going to say, oh, you're just focusing on the physical and it's all spiritual. But then, when you get to things like the Last Supper, the Passover supper with Jesus, and I will try to argue and say, hey, look, he was doing this physical thing to point to a spiritual reality. And then it's like, oh, no, you're missing the physical thing is the important thing there, the physical bread, the physical. So it's like, they just kind of juggle things all over.
When it's convenient.
Yeah, when it's convenient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it is mind-numbing.
But ultimately, though, when they give these sorts of like bizarre teachings and things like that, you hear it and you're in service and you're like, wow, that's amazing, and you highlight it in your Bible and you make your notes, and it just seems so incredible because it's like all the things that we do that seemed wrong before are now justified. Like, you feel good about it, but ultimately you're still just doing things that are like, not godly and not biblical. And, now you're rejoicing because they found some bizarre explanation to why it was okay.
Yeah. So kind of finish out your story. Hey, how did you leave? And then like, what's been the process of getting to where you are now?
So, ultimately, I got to the point during the autumn feast where I said, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to continue. And I skipped a service. I met with one of my neighbors from where I used to live, and, basically told him everything I've been going through. Like, I built a friendship because originally I was trying to preach to this person. I was going there to, recruit him. Because when I was a member of the house church, I joined this community board, and on the community board, he was somebody who was doing good things in the neighborhood through the pandemic, like making masks for people and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, this is somebody I want to preach to. So I started to, connect with him in order to preach, but he was a very devout Catholic person. And, we just ended up becoming friends. So I explained to him everything that I had been going through because it was my one friend. I didn't have any other friends besides this person I was trying to preach to. And I skipped service, and, we hung out for a little bit and spoke about my experience. The next day, though, my wife talked to me, just keep the feast, just get through it. We'll keep, home worship. We'll get through this. And then that was, I think, on October. And I kept on telling her, I'm like, look, I'm just here until the, for you. I'm just here for you. I'm not going because I want to be here. I don't believe anymore. And she's like, okay, just keep coming. So I continued until mid-December, where I was sitting outside of the church, and I decided to call a friend I hadn't spoke to since probably 2010 and explain what I was going through. And my friend was like, you're in a cult. you can't go in there. And I left. And then my wife found out that night because she was going to a different location because it was on Tuesday night. And, she confronted me about it. We said we were going to try to work on our relationship and see if, we can stay together. But, it took no time at all for me to realize, I had to stay home. I had no friends, nothing. I had to live my life as if I were still a member, living under those sorts of guidelines of being a church member. And I realized that I could never really be free of the church as long as we were together. So I decided, to separate from her. And it was really tough because, after like 10 years of marriage, you definitely grow a connection to somebody, but I needed to get away. I needed to get away from the church, and it was an arranged marriage from the beginning, but it was still a very difficult decision for me, and I moved out on my own, and it was really a tough time at the very beginning, but it only lasted like a month of having like some struggles and readjustments, because up until that point, I always lived with somebody. Most of the time I was in the church married, I was living in a house with other people, I'd say half the time. And now I'm living on my own for the first time in my life. And it was a really difficult time. It was really like, I had a really tough time at the very beginning, but my family was right there for me. I'd reach out, they'd check in on me, and I started to reconnect with some of my old friends who, again, welcome me right back and make new friends and explore the things that I'm interested in. And, really pretty quickly, I started to rebound and get my life back together, and really just have a lot of experience, take trips, do things I like. And, it was very quick. I became, happy, healthy, started to take care of myself better than I was, exercise and just live life. So it was tough at the beginning, but it gets a lot better. And I'm definitely really thankful for being able to get my life back and to be able to live and really just seek God. One of the most difficult things is during that darkest time, where typically at that moment I would sit down to pray to God. I would sit down, I put my hands together. I didn't know what to do. It was a very bizarre situation, because they teach you cannot pray to Jesus, because if you do, is a sign of your condemnation. Like Jesus, if anyone gave praise to Jesus, it was a bad name. You could only pray to Ahnsahnghong. You could only pray to God the Mother. Like that's how your prayers had to begin. And you had to pray in his name. And now I just sat there and I felt they taught me, like they have even a song where they sing that, by the name of Jesus, I could not be saved. By the name Jehovah, I could not be saved. Like you sing this, you believe this, you teach it. And now I'm sitting there without a name to pray to, without anyone, like who's going to listen to my prayer. It was a really difficult, like spiritual time. But, you get through it. You have to realize that, there is no salvation under the name Ahnsahnghong. There is no salvation under Zhang Gil Jah. Like these people don't give you salvation. You have to, if you believe the Bible, then it has to be in the name Jesus. It's just their teachings are really corrosive spiritually, because you leave and you feel like you have nowhere to turn. But
yeah. So where, if you don't mind me asking, where are you at this point with God, faith, religion as a whole?
I am, I'm not going to rush into any particular faith again. I am open. I know a lot of people leave and they feel very scorned by it, and they give up. I haven't gone that route, but I do feel like I'm learning a lot and making my choice. I didn't give up on my faith. I'm giving myself a little bit of time to heal, but I will be picking up again and getting into my rebuilding that relationship that, in a way, like I want to say, I severed but I didn't really have that strong of a faith in God before. If anything, this time in the church, if there's anything I'm walking away with is just knowledge of the Bible and a little bit more understanding about God. But unfortunately, it was in the wrong way. It was so
a
now
lot of corruption.
Yeah, and now I have when I hear a verse, sometimes it just triggers what they taught, and that's all I know. So now I'm just trying to do research, read the Bible, come to understand what it actually says, so I can live my life according to it.
Yeah. Well, I'm in many ways right there with you. So I think it doesn't really matter whether from a cult or what religious stream you're coming from, at some point, there should be, I think, in some sense, a deep questioning and analysis of the things that you are believing and holding to. And I mentioned this on the Playing in Traffic podcast that, I tell members for the last few years to question what you believe. Don't just take it and adhere to it because somebody tells you to, but go and examine it and test it, which are all biblical exhortations. The Bible doesn't promote like a information control sort of
yes.
It commends people to go and examine the evidence, and so I there's a lot of things I've believed my whole life that I've come to, in a sense, put most everything on the table, and I think that's healthy. I think that's okay, and there's I think it's a good thing to be able to put everything there. But I think my encouragement for people, and specifically members leaving this group, and something it sounds like it's good to hear that I think you're doing, is not allowing I think it's so easy for the hurt or the frustration, the irritation of whatever all is involved there with coming out of some sort of a religious experience or lifestyle, and then beginning to realize that maybe some of it, or maybe all of it, wasn't what you thought. I think it's easy to kind of over adjust, if that's the right way of saying it, to overcorrect, and to just say, okay, I'm just going to go way over here, way over this way. And so much of that isn't really, I think it's, in many cases, it's so much more of an emotional response than it is a rational one. So I'm not saying that people shouldn't. I'm fine if people end up over here on this side of there is no God or whatever. That's my encouragement is just come there through a honest, rational way.
It's one thing that it has given me is now I pay more attention to, the signs that a place might not be the best place to be. Before, in the World Mission Society Church of God, when I was there, it was like, oh, look at all these red flags, how pretty. But now when I see the red flags, I know, okay, no, that's not something I want to follow.
Right.
So
right. Yeah, that's good. Well, Anthony, I really appreciate you sharing your story. And for everybody watching, we will be doing a part 2 where we'll be looking more at some of the specific doctrines. But Anthony, to kind of close this part out, what would you say to members? What would you say to those watching? Whether it's current members who are maybe watching this coming from a place of just anger and they just really hate your guts at the moment, or to those who are just on the verge of leaving, and those who have left. It's just what would be kind of your thoughts, your encouragement to give to these people?
Well, one, I would say that what they could do with their life is really don't just take what somebody tells you and believe it. It's good to question it. So, if somebody's telling you these are the dates things happen, look it up. Like do some of your own research. If somebody's teaching you something in a Bible class about history, make sure that it's accurate. That's like, do your own homework. Just because it's printed in a pamphlet they give you doesn't mean that it's accurate. On top of that, I would say that it's important for you to also connect with your family. They taught us don't have safety nets, don't have a way out of the church, but it's always important that, you realize that your family is there to support you. I hope, and I don't know everybody's situation, but typically, just rely on your family, they'll be there for you. And then ultimately, don't let your pride hold you back. If you've been, saying, this is the truth, this is the truth, this is the truth, and, over and over, you're repeating it to yourself, and then to feel like you're wrong about what you've been saying, it's okay that you were wrong. It's okay that, maybe you made a mistake. It's, no one's going to hold it against you. You were, taught this, you had many convincing things given to you to believe this, but it's okay that if you were wrong, you could walk away and nobody's going to hold it against you. No one's going to judge you. The only ones who are going to judge you is like, your church members. But really, if they're so quick to shut you out of their lives, were they ever really there for you in the first place? So I would say ultimately, it's okay if you were wrong about this church. If you believed so hard, in its teachings, it's okay, because nobody's going to be there to judge you for it. They're just going to be happy that you've been able to get yourself free from this sort of unjust control over your life. So, and there's definitely brighter days ahead, even though it might hurt like hell at the very beginning, you'll get through it, and, your life will get better. You could pick up the pieces. No matter how much you think you destroyed your life, you can pick it up and continue on.